With Evil Dead Burn hitting theaters soon, we will officially have 6 entries into the Evil Dead franchise. Now, usually a horror movie franchise with these many entries in it is a red flag, but in the case of Evil Dead, honestly bro, the quality really hasn't dipped. I can genuinely say that the Evil Dead franchise as a whole might very well be one of the best horror franchises of all time. And as somebody who is a massive Evil Dead fan, I love to see my franchise still going strong. But before we see if this new movie is deserving of the Evil Dead title, let's rank the other ones and see which one is the best one. So sit back, relax, grab a drink and a snack, and let's rank all the Evil Dead movies from worst to best. Well, in this case, it's like best to best, because I don't think any of them are bad. But before we get into the ranking, don't forget to hit the like button and the subscribe button, plus the notification bell, and also leave a comment below. Now let's get into it. At the number 6 spot, now hold up, wait a second. Now I know you may be wondering, Stoney, what the hell do you mean number 6? Bro, it's only 5 Evil Dead movies. The 6th one ain't came out yet. Technically, you wouldn't be wrong, but technically, you're not right either. Because if we gonna show love to the Evil Dead franchise, we gotta show love to the entire Evil Dead franchise. And you can't do that without 1978's Within the Woods. Now, for those of you who don't know, Within the Woods is actually a short film that Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell linked up together that they could use as a way to raise funds to make the first Evil Dead movie. Because remember, Evil Dead from 1981 is 100% an indie film. It is extremely low budget. Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell raised that money themselves. Sam Raimi had the full concept for the Evil Dead movie, but he didn't have the money for it. So what he and Bruce Campbell did, they linked up, they found a cabin in the woods, and they basically shot the entire cabin scene when they first found the Necronomicon. And Within the Woods is actually the first time we get to see Sam Raimi's infamous demon POV camera pan thing. Admittedly, it is very low budget, very low quality, but honestly, that guerrilla style like ruggedness to it really makes it creepy. Like if you haven't seen Within the Woods, bro, I highly recommend it. You can actually watch it on YouTube for free. And for it to be a low budget short film, it actually has a pretty decent runtime. It's like 30 minutes long. Like I said, it ain't the greatest thing in the world, but it is really beautiful watching where this whole thing came from. If it wasn't for that short film, we would have never had none of what we got today. So for that, Sam Raimi and Bruce, I thank you. Number 5, I gotta go with Evil Dead Rise. Not gonna lie, bruh, it kind of pained me to say that because when they announced this movie, I was overly excited. Mind you, this is coming 10 years after Evil Dead 2013. And that movie, we'll talk about that later. Just because if I start talking about Evil Dead 2013, I'm gonna get distracted and this whole video is gonna be pointless. But with that movie setting the standard for what a new Evil Dead movie should be, the stakes were pretty high. Naturally, of course, the trailer looked amazing, but unfortunately, in the big year of 2023, when the movie came out, and especially in the big year of 2026, the last thing you need to be getting excited over is a trailer that looks good. Because in a lot of cases, the trailer ended up being the only goddamn thing about the movie that was good. Now, one thing I will say about this movie that I love was that opening title card. Hands down, one of the best title cards in recent horror history, bro. I gotta give them their flowers. They absolutely cooked when they made that shit. And don't get me wrong, bro, the movie has a lot of redeeming qualities. The makeup and special effects and the sound design, all top tier. That scene when Danny was listening to the audio tape of the Necronomicon, the way that deep voice came through, bone chilling. That shit was fire. And Elisa Sutherland, who played Ellie, easily one of the best Deadites in the entire Evil Dead franchise. The problem is, that's kind of where it stops, because I genuinely did not like anybody in this movie other than Ellie. Bro, I didn't even like our final girl. Like the main girl was, I think, her sister or something like that. I didn't like her either. I thought all the kids were annoying as hell, especially Danny with his dumb ass. This is all your fault, you know what I'm saying? So just having like an unlikable cast and the only person that you like is the damn demon, it just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. However, I do respect this movie for one major thing. The fact that it actually took a risk and took the Evil Dead franchise out of the cabin. Now granted, we did see that before with the third entry in the original Evil Dead trilogy, but the tone of that movie was so different that it barely feels like an Evil Dead movie. But them taking it from a cabin to an apartment building, that was smart. I mean, overall, I liked it. Wasn't a bad movie at all, but it definitely wasn't like nowhere near my favorite for an Evil Dead movie. You know what I mean? That brings me number 4. And I know for a fact this might rub some people the wrong way, but I gotta stand in my truth, bro. Army of Darkness. The main reason why I'm not a big fan of Army of Darkness, bro, is simply because I watch Evil Dead movies because I want to see horror. I want to see spooky. I want to see dark, dreary hopelessness with a little bit of goofy silliness. That's what I want to see. If I wanted to see a dark fantasy movie, I would have watched Return to Oz, because that's literally what Army of Darkness was. In no way, shape, form, or fashion was this a horror movie. It was a dark fantasy comedy. Don't get me wrong. I think this is one of Ash's best performances, if not his best performance, because this is where all his one-liners came from for the most part. So many legendary quotables from Bruce Campbell in this movie, and for that, I gotta respect it. However, as a whole, nah, bruh. Army of Darkness is legitimately one of those movies that I only choose to watch when I'm doing a marathon of the franchise. I will randomly throw on Evil Dead 1. I will randomly throw on Evil Dead 2. I'll randomly throw on Evil Dead 2013. And to be perfectly honest, I'll still do the same thing with Evil Dead Rise because it fits the aesthetic. But Army of Darkness, nah, I gotta be in the mood for that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's a little too different from what I'm looking for. Overall, it gets my props, it gets my respect, but Army of Darkness, just not really my thing, bro. Number 3, probably another hot take, but I gotta be honest, bruh. The original Evil Dead from 1981. The one thing about this movie that I hold near and dear to my heart is the fact that my introduction to horror movies was through my father. He was and still is a major horror movie junkie, and that man introduced me to so many horror films, and I honestly give that man my endless thanks, because if it wasn't for my pops, I probably wouldn't have the knowledge to do this. But The Evil Dead is the one 80s horror movie that my dad did not introduce me to. I found that shit on my own, and for that, I'm very happy. The problem is, when I first saw The Evil Dead, it scared the hell out of me. I had never seen practical effects like that outside of movies like The Thing and The Fly, but like active demons screaming and blood-curdling yells and all that kind of stuff, bro, that was brand new to me, because my horror upbringing mostly was zombies, werewolves, slashers, and creature features. Me and Pops didn't really get too deep into like the demonic possession kind of genre. Like, me and him wasn't watching The Exorcist like that. Me and him were watching like Zombie from Lucio Fulci, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Friday the 13th, Return of the Living Dead. We were watching stuff like that. So me seeing The Evil Dead for the first time was a totally brand new experience, and that low budget quality to it will always add a creepy factor. But the reason why I put it at number 3 is simply because of an age thing. The movie is very outdated. And yeah, you can technically say like The Thing or The Fly are also outdated, but come on, bro. From a quality standpoint, I want you to look at those movies in comparison to The Evil Dead from 1981. You can definitely see which one was low budget and which one had a big budget. So I can't confidently say that I will put this movie at the top, especially because I do think that there are entries in the franchise that did what the first one did, but better. And that's kind of the whole point of a sequel or reboot or remake or reimagining. It's supposed to be better than what came before it. The problem is that don't happen too often, but when it's done correctly, you should celebrate it. That leads me right into my number 2 on the list, Evil Dead 2013, which is not a remake of the franchise, neither is it a reboot. It is a standalone reimagining. A reimagining of a film is basically when you take the overall plot and just kind of change it up a little bit, like you change character names, or you might change the motives, but overall you keep the setting and everything else the same. It's basically a way to give a brand new twist to an already established property without people complaining about you switching up the lore, because technically it's not the same movie. And I genuinely believe that when it comes to the whole concept of a reimagining, that Evil Dead 2013 is the best horror reimagining of all time. It basically took what Sam Raimi did with the 81 movie and made it 100% better. The gore was better. The practical effects was better. It was a lot more scary. In fact, it was scary as hell, if we want to be honest. The best way that I can describe Evil Dead 2013, bro, is depraved. That is the best word that I can use to describe this movie, because it is batshit crazy. I remember the first time I watched this movie, bro, I was in college, and I was like, oh, 2013 going crazy with horror movies. Because it was, bro. 2013 was really that year. I should make a video about that, actually. Top 10 horror movies of 2013. Y'all let me know if y'all want that. And I really feel like Evil Dead 2013 came out at the perfect time, because this was the time in the 2010s where we started to get that whole demon subgenre, where it was just all about demons, not necessarily demonic possession, but just demons in general. Because we had Insidious, we had The Conjuring, we had movies like Mama, which she wasn't a demon, but she was a ghost that pretty much moved like a demon. And then we had Evil Dead 2013. So I definitely consider it one of those like decade defining films. And let's go ahead and keep it a buck, bro. Evil Dead 2013 gave us one of the best final girls in horror movie history. My girl Mia, she deserves her flowers, because how in the hell do you make a horror movie where the final girl was the victim, the villain, and the hero in the same movie? Please, let's not forget how Evil Dead 2013 went, bro. She was a suffering drug addict who then got turned into a demon. Then she got unpossessed and defeated the demon and then ended up being the only person in her crew who survived the movie. Bro, the girl had to tear her own limb off because it got trapped under a truck, and then she proceeded to slice the demon in half while it was storming blood from the sky with a chainsaw. She's badass. Put some respect on her name, bro. But yeah, man, that's enough glazing of Evil Dead 2013. I've said enough. You already know what it is. But to conclude the list, I gotta go with my number one. The king of Evil Dead, Evil Dead 2. Evil Dead 2 is when my boy Ash became Ash. Army of Darkness may be where he, elevated his craft, but if it wasn't for Evil Dead 2, we wouldn't have the man that we got now. This is the movie that gave us the boomstick. This is the movie that gave us the chainsaw hand. This is the movie that gave us the iconic line, groovy. Not to mention, this movie also has what I consider to be one of the coolest scenes in 80s movie history.
Hey, I'll swallow your soul. I'll swallow your soul. I'll swallow your soul. Swallow this.
I love everything about Evil Dead 2, bro. It is so 1980s. Like, I don't know if that makes sense, but like when I look at that movie, all I see is the 80s. That is one of the most 80s movies ever made, bro. This is the movie where Sam Raimi decided to take Evil Dead from just your typical dark horror franchise into more of a slapstick horror comedy franchise. And honestly, I think that was probably the best decision that he could have made. And it's so crazy because it took him like 6 years to make this movie. And that's because when he made the first Evil Dead, he basically lost the rights to the whole thing. Like, he couldn't use the name The Evil Dead. He couldn't even use the font that it was written in. He couldn't use any of the footage that he filmed for the first movie in the second one. So when he made the second Evil Dead movie, he had to drop the from Evil Dead and just named it Evil Dead 2. And he basically had to remake the whole movie. So everything that you see in the beginning of Evil Dead 2 is a redo of the first one, where Ash discovers the cabin, but this time instead of being with his friends, he's just with his girlfriend. He rediscovers the Necronomicon for the first time, and then is introduced to all the demons and the Deadites, which basically means that Evil Dead 1 from 1981, low-key, is not canon to the franchise because it doesn't exist. Because in Sam Raimi's continuation of the franchise, he does not have the rights to that first film. So it doesn't even matter. None of that stuff that happened in the first movie actually happened. Technically, it's not canon. And honestly, bro, I think that's what low-key made him turn it into a horror comedy. Because if he pretty much had to reshoot the whole movie, he couldn't just copy and paste the whole thing. You had to do something to make it different. It don't get no different than that. Bruce Campbell carried that whole movie because for 95% of that movie, he's the only person in it. And honestly, bro, that movie really just proves how great of an actor Bruce Campbell is, bro, because he was able to run through all of those emotions: scared, happy, sad, silly, goofy, all in one by himself, trapped in a cabin with all of these crazy practical effects going around. Like, he put his heart and soul into that role. Bruce Campbell's Ash is so iconic that I pray they never give us another Ash. I don't want to see Ash 2.0 because ain't nobody gonna do it like him. Evil Dead 2 is not just my favorite Evil Dead movie, it is one of my favorite 80s horror movies of all time. No debate. Evil Dead 2 is the king of the Evil Dead franchise. Well, that concludes today's ranking, ladies and gentlemen. If you agree with my ranking, let me know in the comments. If you disagree, comment below what your Evil Dead ranking would be. Based on the trailer from Evil Dead Burn, it does look promising, but you already know you can't get too hyped on the trailer. But I don't want to be negative, so I'm just gonna claim that the movie is gonna be good because it's the Evil Dead. Well, y'all stay tuned for more. I'll catch y'all next time, and don't forget, like, subscribe, and notification bell. You already know who it is. It's your boy Stoney the Great. I'll catch y'all in the next video. Y'all be easy.